Hi, I'm Jerry Custer with Comfort Keepers, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Laura Wayman with Comfort Keepers, who is our dementia expert and will explain to us how we care for our dementia patients.
Thank you, Jerry. Once again, I am Laura Wayman. I am a world-renowned dementia expert. I am known around the world as the Dementia Whisperer. And today, I am going to make you all dementia experts. There is so much misunderstanding, so many miscommunications and myths about dementia, and I need you to truly understand the heart of dementia and what it does for those that are affected and for those who are caring for anyone diagnosed with any cause of dementia. And everything that you've learned as caregivers, I'm going to tell you to forget it today, because many of the things that work for somebody with a normal brain do not work for somebody with dementia who basically has a broken brain or a broken thinker. So we're going to learn today how to communicate with someone with dementia, and also ways that we can support that family caregiver who has been thrust into that position without any support, without any education, and without any inspiration or encouragement. So I am going to start today with a story, a personal story. I'm going to tell you the story of Peggy. Many, many years ago, when Peggy was only 17, she was asked to go to her town square dance. They had a monthly square dance in her little town, and they would invite from other towns in the region guest square dance callers. And that particular night, when Peggy, as a young girl, stepped into that square dance hall, there was a guest square dance caller, a young man by the name of Jack. Now, Peggy took one look at Jack, and she turned to her girlfriends who were with her and said, "Oh my goodness, that man's so handsome, I'm going to marry that man." So she went up and introduced herself. Now, Peggy and Jack were seen talking throughout the whole evening, and before the end of that square dance, Jack asked Peggy out on their first date. They began to date over the next year, fell madly in love, so on Peggy's 18th birthday, they eloped. Jack and Peggy had a wonderful, magical life together. They had 5 children of their own. And Peggy was that true caregiver at heart. She loved caring for children. So she not only raised her own 5 children, she began to bring in foster children as well. So she raised her own 5 children next to over 20 foster children, and every one of those foster children had special care needs. Peggy would not say no to a child in need. She raised those children to young adulthood. They began to leave the home in search of their own life, their own career, their own education. And Jack and Peggy were soon realizing they were going to be empty nesters, facing their retirement. Their retirement dream was to sell their house, buy an RV, and travel all over the United States. They couldn't do that when they were raising all those kids. So fate was kind. Peggy managed to have all those kids out on their own as young adults scattered over the United States, sold their house. Jack and Peggy bought an RV, and for 15 years they traveled around. And then Jack's health began to fail. First, he got macular degeneration, so he couldn't see to drive anymore. Then he began to show common signs and symptoms of dementia. So Peggy got him to their family physician, explained these symptoms, was very concerned because they seemed to be getting worse and worse. And Jack was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease as the cause of his dementia symptoms. Peggy knew enough about that. She knew that he was going to get worse over time. So she knew they needed to change their lifestyle so she could step back into the role of being a caregiver and provide him with appropriate care. So they sold their beloved RV. They bought a little house in a small town, and Peggy stepped back into the role of being a caregiver, this time for her beloved spouse of over 60 years who had a progressive cause of dementia. So at first, of course, she was that caregiver at heart. She was doing great. And then as his dementia symptoms got worse, as they will, as he got more and more challenging symptoms, Peggy began to struggle taking care of him by herself. But there was no one close to her to help. So in her phone conversations to her family, all whom were long distance, from this little town that they settled in, that was full of retired people, in the phone conversations, Peggy began to explain to her family how difficult this was becoming. She, for example, said now Jack is beginning to wander, which is a common dementia symptom. But Peggy could not take her eyes off of him for a minute because he would be out the door and down the road. She couldn't even go in the bathroom and close the door and have privacy because she had to supervise him at all times. He was not sleeping. He would get very agitated and anxious in the evening and late into the night. So, of course, Peggy was not sleeping well. And what broke her heart was that with his short-term memory loss, often when she would go to give him care, he would forget who she was. And he would become very anxious because he would think she was a stranger in their own home after 60 years of marriage. While she was having these conversations with her family, the family would say, "It sounds like you need some help in there. Why don't you get some help?" And she said, "You know, we made a mistake when we moved to this little town because I didn't look to see if there was any help here. I raised over 20 foster children and our own 5 children, many of them with very special care needs without any help. I thought I was going to be able to take care of my husband. I thought I'd be able to do that by myself. So I didn't look to see if there was Comfort Keepers trained caregivers to come in the home and help me. There's no one here like that. So I'm just going to have to push through this myself. I didn't realize I needed it." So one night after these conversations were becoming more and more, and the family was becoming quite upset because they could hear that she was exhausted, but they were all long distance and she wouldn't let them help. One night, Peggy sat down with Jack to have dinner. She always made him a wonderful dinner. They were alone in the home. And when Peggy sat down, she suffered a massive heart attack. Now, Jack's dementia was so far advanced, he didn't realize she needed help. He didn't understand that it was an emergency. He eventually wandered next door, said something confusing about how Peggy was tired. She was sleeping on the floor. So by the time help arrived, it was too late. Peggy was gone. Peggy was my mother. That's why I'm standing in front of you today, because I need you to realize as a Comfort Keepers caregiver the importance that you are, how important you are to these family caregivers, let alone those with dementia who need us desperately. And most of the time the family caregiver is so overwhelmed they don't even know what kind of help to ask for. So when they bring us their precious cargo, their loved one with dementia, we must know in our hearts that we can do our best to manage that situation, but when we take them on and help that caregiver, we save their life. I could have saved my mother's life with your help had I known this. That's why I'm sharing it with you today. I need you to understand the importance of this information, because there's few people who understand dementia and understand the impact, the negative impact that dementia has on these family caregivers, especially if they are same age spouse. It is amazing, these particular shocking results, because 68% of the time the primary caregiver, especially if it's a same age spouse, just like my mother, 68% of the time they get sick and go first if they do not ask for help. It takes a village to care for someone with dementia, but it takes specialized care training to do it properly. You can't just go into a home if you don't understand dementia, because you will be of little or no help. And I'm going to show you why it is so important for us to know this and how we can step above. You will feel accomplished and empowered with this information as a Comfort Keepers caregiver, above and beyond anyone else. And I want you to know that this is a silent pandemic. 50% of our clients over the age of 70 have some cause of dementia. 50% of our clients, probably more than that. You probably see that when you are out there in the field working. It is a huge silver tsunami that will hit us, and we must be prepared. And as I travel around the United States, I am shocked at how very few people actually understand this. I go into memory care where there is hundreds of staff members, caregivers, who supposedly are trained to help people with dementia, and yet when I ask them this question, only about 3% can answer it. What is dementia? When I travel around the United States and I'm speaking to attorneys and doctors and nurses, they can't answer this question. And yet it is the most horrific illness of our time. So I want you to be able to answer this. I want you to imagine that outside the door today, there is a reporter and a cameraman waiting for you from a local TV station. And when you go out, they say, oh my goodness, you just heard the world famous dementia whisperer tell you all about dementia. Could you please answer for millions of our viewing audience, could you please answer the question, what is dementia? Millions of people want to know. I want you to be able to give that answer. And I want you to know when you give that clear answer, you know more about dementia than about 85% of the population. But what would you do if they burst into the room right now with that camera rolling, with that microphone in hand, walked up to you and said, what is dementia? How would you answer that? That's okay, I'm going to give you the answer. Most people can't answer it. First of all, I am going to tell you what dementia is not. Dementia is not a diagnosis, and you will see this on people's medical paperwork. Dementia is not a diagnosis. Dementia is a list of symptoms. And it is a list of symptoms that tells us that person is losing normal brain function, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So let me tell you to help you understand, let me tell you what I mean by the word symptom. You all in this room have probably at one time or another experienced the symptom of pain. Is that correct? You've all experienced pain? You all know then that pain is a symptom. It's not a diagnosis. For example, if you went to your doctor and you had pain in your elbow, and you said, oh, I've got this horrible pain in my elbow, your expectation would be that the doctor would run tests to find out what is causing the pain. There's something wrong with your elbow. Your body is communicating there's something wrong. It's not functioning properly. Something's wrong. And so it communicates the symptom of pain. How would you feel if you went to the doctor, I've got this horrible pain in my elbow, the doctor didn't run any tests, didn't do anything, just listened to you say, you've got this symptom of pain, smiled at you and said, yes, you have pain, wrote pain as the diagnosis on your chart and sent you home. What would you do? Get a new doctor maybe? That doctor did not meet realistic expectations of finding out, diagnosing the cause. That's the diagnosis. What is causing the pain? What is wrong? Treating successfully that diagnosis, which would make the pain go away. Now, the doctor can also choose to treat the symptom by giving you pain medication, but that only masks the pain. It does not make it go away. Is that correct? You agree with all of that? Well, let's change that scenario for a minute. Let's just say you take your mom in with common symptoms of dementia. You bring your mom to that doctor, you say, you know, my mom she's getting more and more of these symptoms, but for example, she's very confused. Often she's disoriented. There are times when she's exhibiting short-term memory loss, and that seems to be getting worse. But the most disturbing is the fact that she often cannot understand or process the world around her. What she hears, what she sees, she struggles with that. And when that happens, she gets really overwhelmed, overstimulated. It's too much information. She gets very anxious. So, doctor, what's going on? Now, I want you to feel empowered with the knowledge that you understand you just described common dementia symptoms. When you described them to the doctor, your expectation was that he would do his due diligence to try and get to what is causing these symptoms. Because how would you feel, once again, if that doctor said, oh, your mom has dementia? Because now you know better. You can smile right back and say, I know that already. She has these symptoms, that is dementia. I need to find out what is causing it. Because, once again, dementia is the list of symptoms that tells us that person is losing normal brain function, but something has to cause that to happen. There is a myth that aging causes dementia. It does not. Healthy aging does not cause you to lose normal brain function. You slow down a little bit, but you do not lose it permanently. You must have a cause that is going in and robbing you permanently of normal brain function. And to make it more complicated, because there's so many moving parts, There are over 100 different causes of dementia. We're very familiar with the leading cause, and